So Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta has yet again pulled off a savvy, familiar move when it comes to team building, and that's what I have coming up in this episode, which is brought to you by my friends at Preston Automotive Group. Welcome inside the channel. Glad you're here. It is 4:45 on Tuesday, July 23rd, day 3 of Ravens training camp has come and went, and we are off and running. Before we get into the content from today, again, Preston and at Preston, Bobby Baltimore subscribers receive 2 exclusive offers. That's $500 towards a new or pre-owned vehicle, or when you buy 4 tires, you'll receive 50% off your alignment. You've got over 2,000 vehicles to shop from. Home delivery is available. You'd be joining the Preston team along with Kyle Hamilton, Mark Andrews, many more throughout Baltimore and beyond, including myself. Cars cost less with Preston. You can get started today by visiting PrestonMotor.com. All this information is included in the show notes below, or just simply scan the QR code that you see in the upper right-hand corner. And if you go over to PrestonMotor.com right now, as you see on the screen, you've got the site operator, Beth, at your service 24 hours a day. You can contact Preston simply by filling out this form. And then, of course, you can specify your search down to a bunch of different categories, from price range to vehicle type to year, make, model, location, dealership, so on and so forth. So if you're interested and you want to get involved and in the car buying process, please do so and consider Preston. I just heard from my good buddy Matt Parrison, who just found himself a Bronco. So looking forward to seeing him on the wheels in and around Baltimore on the roads in those Preston wheels. Okay, so here's what we have to get to today. This just came down, I think it was actually during our live stream earlier today when Sarah and I were on doing our lunch hour. And we now know the figures for Eddie Jackson, new Ravens safety, who's going to be joining the group after how many years in Chicago? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So 7 seasons he spent in Chicago. The Ravens signed him over the weekend, and he will be the favorite to be safety number 3 behind Kyle and Marcus in Zach Orr's secondary. So the figures, it's just 1 year, 1.5 million. Okay. And the actual, I'll actually figure, I'll get this right now from Aaron Wilson so you can get down to the specifics of the signing itself. Let's see here. 1.5 million is the salary. A signing bonus of $250K. 1 million of that salary is total guaranteed, and $750K of his base salary is guaranteed. So again, really low risk, high reward for a guy who's been around this league for a long time, who has a decorated resume, and yet just hasn't quite sniffed the playoffs, right? Has not sniffed relevance when it comes to success in the NFL because of being with Chicago over the last 7 seasons. I mean, this is a guy who, when you look at his credentials, we're talking about a first-team All-Pro back in 2018, a 2-time Pro Bowler, also in 2018 and then in 2019. He was named as one of the 100 greatest Chicago Bears of all time in franchise history. And just go and look at the numbers too. Okay. 459 tackles, two career sacks, 10 forced fumbles throughout his career, 6 fumble recoveries, 15 interceptions, and 6. This is probably the most notable number, 6 defensive touchdowns. Now, granted, we get it. We understand that he has not been the same since his Liz Frank injury in 2022. The numbers show you exactly that, and that's why he was still available. So when I say brilliant move, it's brilliant from a contractual monetary standpoint. It's not brilliant from a personnel standpoint. Maybe it ends up being the case. I mean, the guy walked right in on day 1 after being signed and had a pick 6, had an interception right away. So perhaps he could have a resurgence, right? Rejuvenation being in Baltimore, where it's, let's face it, anything short of playing for a Lombardi trophy is probably disappointing and below expectations, right? So that's what I'm saying. What I think is brilliant here is just yet another move mid-training camp, or in this case, on the eve of training camp, that helps bolster this roster. Last year, you saw it from Eric DeCosta bringing in Jadeveon Clowney. And then 1 month into the season, they bring in Kyle Van Noy. Well, guess what? The two of those guys pretty much pretty much accounted for what? God, probably over 70%, maybe over 60, 70% of the production from a pass rush standpoint. So the moral of the story here is what makes this even more brilliant is what Eddie's going to try and replace. We know that Geno Stone walked out the door in free agency and earned a 2-year contract with the Cincinnati Bengals that's going to pay him $7 million annually for the next 2 years. That's 14 in total. Okay, so Geno leaves, deservedly so. You hate to see it obviously happen in division, but that's what happened. Same thing with Patrick Queen. There was a lot of that. Deshaun Elliott is in Pittsburgh as well. There's a lot of different AFC North shuffling around going on. But for this right now, Geno, yes, suits up for the rival, but they weren't going to pay him given the cap situation. And instead, they bring in Eddie Jackson, who, let's be honest, in terms of the production from last year that he's going to have to try and replicate, given these numbers, you don't necessarily have to mirror, right? Let's say you bring in, gosh, like a certain percentage worth of last year's production that Geno gave you, and Eddie can give you 30 to 40% of that for this upcoming season at those numbers, those team-friendly numbers. That is a win. That is a huge win. And let's take a look at those numbers too. We'll go big screen. After a career year for Geno Stone, we know he had at one point what was a league-leading 7 interceptions. He started 11 games, played in 17. We know that the Ravens wanted to, at some point in the year, it became pretty clear what Mike McDonald felt like he had to do. And that was ensuring that 3 safeties were on the field for Baltimore. And due to Kyle Hamilton's versatility, they were able to do exactly that with Geno, Kyle, and Marcus. Okay. 68 combined tackles, 44 of which were solo. And this was somebody who just served as a ball hawk, served as just a reliable back end guy who developed right before our eyes over the last few years as a former 7th rounder out of Iowa, kind of following that lineage in Baltimore, late day 3 picks at the safety position that are still hanging around in the NFL in their second contracts. Deshaun Elliott comes to mind. Chuck Clark comes to mind after losing all of last year to an injury up there with the New York Jets. And Geno certainly is one of those. Could Sanusi Kane be the next guy? The rookie 7th rounder out of Purdue that the Ravens drafted back in April. These are the numbers from last year that Geno Stone posted, which ultimately awarded him a significant contract in Cincinnati. What about Eddie Jackson? Of course, you'll notice the drop-off since 2022 in that Liz Frank, which limited him to just 12 games in 22, 12 in 23. The numbers are down, right? And yeah, it's been on somewhat of a steady decline since his unbelievable 2018 and 2019 campaigns. Look at those though. Were they something else or what? Look at this dude. 6 interceptions in 2018. 2 in 19. He did have 4 prior to that Liz Frank in 2022. So he was trending in the right direction. But just think about, first of all, the Ravens don't necessarily need him to be the Eddie Jackson of old. If that's an expectation, forget about it. You're not going to want that. You're in trouble if you're expecting or hoping or banking on that Eddie Jackson's going to be the Eddie Jackson of 2019. It's not going to happen. That was 5 years ago. And that's just not realistic. But if Eddie can be rejuvenated in Baltimore, be used wisely and allow Zach Orr to use Kyle Hamilton as what we all know is the ultimate chess piece in football, up and down. I mean, you look at the snap count from last year. This dude was literally used all over the field. And Marlon Humphrey actually spoke about it earlier today that aside from nose guard, he's of the belief nose guard would be tricky for somebody as lanky as Kyle is. But Marlon said it best earlier today. He's like, look, take nose guard aside. Kyle can play any single position you need or want him to on the defensive side of the football. And damn it, knowing him and knowing his family pedigree from an athleticism standpoint, it wouldn't surprise me if he could even line up as a tight end, but we won't go down that road. So Eddie's flexibility, Eddie's ability to play both free and strong safety will open things up and really view him as the Geno Stone replacement. But again, given those numbers that was back on the opening slide, it just kind of takes away the pressure or the expectation that this guy literally needs to be what Geno was for them last year. If he is, oh man, that's gravy. If he doesn't, that's okay. You're giving him a 1.5 million. Very similar to the number that Kyle Van Noy signed for a year ago. And look what he gave you in the pass rush department. It's a savvy, familiar move made by the Ravens front office, led by Eric DeCosta, that we see time and time again this time of year. It doesn't always pay dividends. It certainly did last year. We'll see if it does this year. And so all of a sudden, you're looking at a playmaking group. It's got a lot of talent. Certainly on paper, Ravens have a lot of talent in the secondary. Of course, a breakout season Brandon Stevens is coming off of. Perhaps he's the next guy Eric DeCosta tries to get out in front of when it comes to extensions. Marcus Williams, of course, the big free agency splash from a couple years ago. Can he stay healthy? If he can, we know he is one of the premier safeties in the game. Marlon Humphrey, who shed 5 pounds, went from 200 to 195, trying to get himself right, trying to bounce back from a career low year, something that he has looked straight in the face, held himself accountable, acknowledged, and it's now time to move forward. Kyle Hamilton, we know what he is. There's a reason why Zach Orr gets up in front of the media during his first offseason press conference and says, hey, listen, our goals, my goal for Kyle, I want him to be a future defensive player of the year. Oh, okay, that turned some heads when we saw that. Nate Wiggins continues to impress through a few short days to begin his first ever training camp as one of the rookies and the former first-round pick from back in April out of Clemson. Somebody that's got great comeback speed. But as he said today during his press conference, he doesn't want to rely on his comeback speed. Right? The catch-up comeback speed when you're beat. He doesn't want to have to rely on that at the NFL level. He wants to rely on feisty, fierce, and savvy hands. And I think from a technique standpoint, that's exactly what he's going to be honing in on between now and September 5th when the Ravens kick off the 2024 season against the reigning champs, the back-to-back reigning champs, Kansas City Chiefs, at their place at Arrowhead. And, of course, Eddie Jackson rounds out this list. The expected safety number 3 behind Kyle and Marcus, and somebody with a tremendous amount of experience under his belt. And just because I included these 6 on the slide doesn't mean that there aren't more others deserving of being in here, whether it's an honorable mention or just being on the damn screen itself. TJ Tampa is going to start the year down, or at least start training camp down. He has sports hernia. He's one of the rookies that the Ravens are excited about, a value pick mid-round who fell. Right, Ardarius Washington at safety. TJ's a corner, I should have said. But Ardarius Washington at safety, a former undrafted rookie. Certainly, perhaps on the bubble, but I think somebody that they trust when healthy. Will Sanusi Kane find his way onto this roster as their 7th rounder? Or perhaps could one of the undrafted rookies beat him out in Bo Braid, perhaps? There's others. There's certainly other candidates out there. But a Bo Braid comes to mind. Perhaps that's more of the familiarity, being that he played his college football at Maryland locally. Come here, Till. Where are you going? Live stream. Tilly's on the move. Come here, Till. Oh, Tilly is on the move. Not sure where she's going. Lots of activity, by the way, here in upstate New York. Heading back down to Maryland tomorrow for those of you who've been following along. My 30th birthday is this upcoming weekend in Ocean City, Maryland. And I've got 13 different guys, 13 buddies from a mixture of places, home, college, just Baltimore, all descending onto West Ocean City for a fun weekend. So I'm getting ready to kind of pack things up here. There's just a lot of different activities going on. But if you're wondering too, by the way, for those of you who are into the jersey side of things, jersey numbers in this case, Eddie Jackson will be suiting up in a number 39 in purple. There he is right there, smiling. Another Florida boy among these Ravens. There's plenty of them. They are a tight-knit Ravens group that hail from South Florida. Eddie is one of them. Already knows and knew Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry from his time at Alabama, along with Marlon as well. So there's going to be plenty to go around in terms of, I'm sure, cultivating friendships between now and September 5th. And Ing knows. He's apparently, if there's a place outside of Baltimore where we're starting to get well represented, and it's not just starting, it's been like this. South Florida is like, what do they call the Chargers? Ravens West? It seems to me that there's a Ravens South developing here, and I think Ing Raven might be the committee leader for this. But it is kind of cool, and he makes you wonder how much that weighs into Eric DeCosta's decision making from a team building standpoint. Because, gosh, I mean, just start ripping off dudes that are down there that spend their offseason there. Derrick Henry, I know he spends a lot of time in Dallas, but like he's originally from there. Lamar, Zay, Snoop before he left, Nelly. Who else am I missing? There's others out there. So, yeah, the South Florida Ravens are well repped, and there's plenty of them to go around. And I think that means something to the chemistry side of things. What's going on in the live chat right now? Appreciate you guys for being with me. Just after 5 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday, the 23rd. Tank Bromansky says, Bobby, I made you into a cornerback in Madden. You and Hamilton make it a no-fly zone every game. LOL. Listen, why the hell are you making me into a cornerback? I don't know if that's the best team-building approach, Tank, but I appreciate the love. Yo, Jitsu says, I believe our defense is going to be better than last year. Whew. That's lofty. That would be a tremendous accomplishment if that's the case, being that they were top 5 in just about every category you could find. By the way, some notes from day 3 of Ravens training camp. Odafe Owe continues to, and by the way, like take this with a grain of salt when we give you updates this time of year, right? Lamar has missed the first 3 days of camp with an undisclosed illness. So just throwing that out there. How can you truly evaluate camp when QB1, your reigning MVP, is not out there? With that said, Odafe Owe, John Harbaugh pointed out specifically in a good way, he put a ton of pressure on quarterbacks that Harbs actually had to, and I'm using his words specifically, quote, pull the reins in a little bit on Odafe. We've heard it about Odafe this time of year before. We've heard it this time of year about Rashad Bateman. We already have through the first couple days of camp. What we haven't consistently heard from those guys is regular season performance. Now, that may be due to injury in Rashad's case. That may be due to inconsistency or the inability to finish in Adafe's case. So I always like to make it very clear time and time again. Let's take it with a grain of salt when we're talking on July 23rd about some of these standouts at camp. But we also need to mention it. So that's that. What about Arthur Mollett? This dude, I thought, was one of the unsung heroes, glue guys from last year that the Ravens brought in. Another last-minute relatively addition in terms of whether or not he would be a key contributor. And guess what? Right now, he's making a case for why he should be on this list in terms of defensive maulers who are going to play a role in the 2024 Ravens. Okay. He's already had 3 interceptions in as many days to kickstart Ravens training camp. I love him, whether it's for the nickel role, whether I don't care where you just get him involved. He is a hard hitting, nasty player, somebody who understands what it means to play AFC North football. And I like me some, I'm going to tell you right now, I like me some Arthur Mollett. And I hope he finds his way not only onto the roster, which I believe he will. When you look at the numbers that he and Eddie Jackson are under contract for, you would think that it would behoove the Ravens to keep those two guys around. I think they will, clearly, in Eddie's case, because of the amount of attention and experience that he commands. But look for an Arthur Mollett to quietly play a key role for this Ravens defense this upcoming season. Again, couple good days, particularly in the rain on Monday for Rashad Bateman, where man, he's just showing that not only in his offseason videos that have leaked onto Instagram and social media that he's in shape, but he's just showing that he can be a playmaker. We know that about Rashad. I don't think that's up for debate. We know what his capabilities are. We just haven't seen that sustained yet throughout his, 3 years. This will be year 4 in the league. Aside from that, there's some other updates to go around as well, but Sarah and I will get into those in detail coming up for Wednesday's Ravens Lunch Hour live stream. Evan checks in. What's up, Evan? I think this is the most talent depth we've ever had in our secondary, which says a lot, which makes me think. Did you guys hear what RG3 said earlier in the week? Remember, RG3 is quoted for saying that this is the most talented team, top to bottom, that Lamar Jackson has had since he entered the league and joined the Ravens in 2018. Do you guys agree with that? Is this the most talented team? Or was it last year? I think last year's team could go toe-to-toe. I won't say it's 2019, even though that may be the most dominant team of the Lamar era, but I can't say it's 2019. You want to know why? Because they hadn't invested in wide receivers around Lamar. So while they were able to win a shit ton of games, ultimately their inability to stop Derrick Henry on that night in January in the 2019 divisional round was the be all end all. But then in the years that followed, towards the end of the Greg Roman era, it became pretty clear that without a true investment in wide receivers, playmakers around Lamar, they weren't going to get to where they want to go. So, what is it? Is it last year's team or is it this year's team on paper with the most talent depth? Interesting comment there, Evan. Nikita says it's becoming increasingly difficult to find weaknesses in our roster. Don't necessarily disagree, but I think while you never root for this, let's really test the depth. Okay. And Sarah and I were talking about this within the last couple weeks. And while these sometimes can be looked at as worst case scenarios, there has to be conversation around this. What if the injury bug hits the running back room or the wide receiver room? And all of a sudden, you're looking at a running back room without Derrick Henry. And let's say it happens before Keaton Mitchell has been cleared for return. There's a lot of question marks. I'm not saying there's not candidates in the building, because there are, both in undrafted form and who they brought in this past April, whether it be Rasheen Ali, whether it be Owen Wright, whether it be Justice Hill. There are other players in the building, but they come with question marks. The same way, if Zay were to go down, are we really comfortable with the wide receiver room? I would argue I'd be uncomfortable, just as I'd be uncomfortable without Derrick Henry. And so while right now, as currently constructed and fully healthy for the most part, top down, aside from Keaton, Yeah, it's very difficult to find weaknesses. And I think they're stacked in other areas, to Evan's point. From a secondary standpoint, defensively, I think that they're really uh, well prepared. But wide receiver and running back, those are two position groups that I think of. If worse comes to worse, just just a part of the thought process. Alan wants to know, what weaknesses do we see on defense besides linebacker depth? Yeah, I guess like outside of, like, if Trenton weren't to make this like seamless transition that we're all kind of expecting from him, that would be a question mark, right? Do you keep Josh Ross? I think he's going to end up being a practice squad player. Like, you're definitely going to keep Chris Board. You bring him back in free agency, which kind of was an under the radar signing after he left for New England for, I think, a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. But you're definitely going to keep Chris Board around because he's a special teams ace. I would be surprised if they didn't. But outside of that, yeah, I don't like. I think they're pretty set depth wise as I look through the starting defense and, second and third stringers, so on and so forth. Same thing with offensive line. You got a lot of depth there. You may not have all your answers right now, but you have a lot of depth. Adam checks in and says that undrafted free agent rookie wide receiver Dayton Wade, you could see him making the roster if he can get some chemistry with Lamar. Do you think he looks better than Tylan Wallace? I'm not going to go there yet. I think that's Tylan's job to lose. And if I'm a betting man, I'm going to have Dayton on the practice squad to begin the year. But he has certainly garnered some attention. I remember Pat Ricard calling him out as one of the, in a good way, calling him out, like as one of the standout players that he had noticed since training camp got underway in the offseason procedures and whatnot. So yeah, as of right now, I'll go the safe side, Adam, with Dayton Wade, but wouldn't surprise me if he continue, make yourself available, stay available, and be ready. All right, guys, I went a little bit longer than expected, almost 30 minutes here. So appreciate you guys for dropping by the channel. Let me know what you think of Eric DeCosta's move and what your expectations are for Eddie Jackson. Like the video if you enjoyed the stream. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And check us out in live format tomorrow inside the vault. It's a 12 noon Eastern Ravens lunch hour live stream on Wednesday, July 24th. I look forward to catching up with you guys then. Thanks to Preston Automotive Group for all the support they give me, an opportunity to drive around a sweet 2023 Ford Bronco Sport, and just a tremendous amount of belief in what I'm building here. So thanks, guys. Leave a comment, like the video, do all that good stuff, and hit that notification bell so you can be alarmed and notified when I'm dropping content. Talk soon. Thanks, guys.